Well, earlier this week, the trio of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger Republic officially ended their membership of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. Tonight, Babajide Ogunsanwo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst, is here to share analysis and, of course, insights about the scenarios ahead. Hello, Babajide. It's good to have you on the news at 10. Thank you for joining us. Now, when we look at this issue, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, all leaving ECOWAS, can this be described as something positive or a win for ECOWAS and maybe a loss for the three countries? What is the outlook?
You know, if we look at the recent case study of Brexit, looking at, and this is in January 5 years ago, 2020, officially the United Kingdom left the European Union. And if you look at the results of that Brexit, it's been a loss for the EU and it's been a loss for the United Kingdom. And that's because in the United Kingdom, we've seen slower economic growth, we've seen less foreign direct investments. Even into the UK, we've seen less job opportunities, and we've seen clearly a lot of challenges that the country faces. So for our situation here, ECOWAS and these three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, it is likely going to be similar. A loss for ECOWAS and a loss for these three countries. But beyond this, and I would like to quickly talk about the perspectives from the side of Nigeria and the perspectives from the side of these three countries, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. Because clearly what is happening is they want to eat their cake and have it. And it's really, really difficult for me to eat this and have it. Now, what do I specifically mean? From the perspective of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, their position is that more than 50% of ECOWAS land area of 5.1 million square kilometers lies in these three countries. So they feel they're going out with a large chunk of ECOWAS. They also feel that currently, because their citizens still will be able to use the ECOWAS passports, it's a big victory for them. And as well, they are partly still in ECOWAS because their citizens have a valid ECOWAS passport and they are also joining a different bloc, which they've tagged the Alliance for Sahel States, which now opens up possibilities of them partnering with countries like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya. So for them, they are trying to eat their cake and have it. For Nigeria as well, Nigeria's position is also very clear. And more than half of the population of ECOWAS lives in Nigeria. In simple terms, when we talk about ECOWAS, we're really talking about Nigeria plus. Nigeria is ECOWAS. Majority of the citizens in ECOWAS live in Nigeria, and clearly the market is with us. Beyond this, less than 20% of all of ECOWAS population live in these three countries. So for ECOWAS feels like it's good riddance to. So these two blocks, the new ECOWAS bloc that has ECOWAS excluding these three countries feel they're still in a very dominant position, and these other countries, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, feel they still have a dominant position because really of all the things I've talked about. So both blocks trying to eat their cake and have it. But eventually it's likely going to lead to a loss for these three countries and yes, a loss for ECOWAS.
Now the question is, how will the new ECOWAS bloc operate? When we talk about how much it will affect counterterrorism operations in the region.
Before we talk about how it will affect counterterrorism, Anne, let's first of all try and think about what exactly is going through the heads of the leaders in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. So let's take a look at what exactly has led them to perhaps be bold about this decision. First, Burkina Faso. If we take a look at Burkina Faso shares borders with 6 countries. Out of these 6 countries, 5 of them majorly speak French as their national language. So clearly Burkina Faso has strong ties and bilateral agreements with these 5 countries. All the countries surrounding Burkina Faso, excluding Ghana, has French as a major language, and Burkina Faso over several decades has developed strong ties with this country. So the question is, will the ECOWAS leaving ECOWAS affect their position with their direct neighbors? Perhaps the answer is no. Let's take a look at Niger. Niger shares borders with 7 countries. Out of these 7 countries, 4 of them are in ECOWAS. Algeria is not in ECOWAS, Libya is not in ECOWAS, Chad is not in ECOWAS. However, out of the 4 countries that are in ECOWAS that Niger shares borders with, 3 of them, their major language again is French. So we see Niger having strong bilateral agreements with Mali, Burkina Faso, Benin. So clearly we see that Niger still would ride on its landlocked state to be able to do a lot of trade and economic and security collaborations with these countries that it shares borders with. Let's take a look at Mali. Again, Mali shares borders with 7 countries. However, 5 of these countries are in ECOWAS. It shares borders with Algeria. Algeria is not in ECOWAS. It shares borders with Mauritania. Mauritania is not in ECOWAS. And if you focus on those 5 countries Mali shares borders with, all these countries has French as their dominant language. So again, the leader in Mali feels very comfortable that the history of culture, language, and trade and economic partnership that he has with these countries perhaps will see it through. But again, let's be clear. The Nigerian armed forces have taken their position that the priority of the military still remains to protect Nigeria's territorial integrity. And if you take a look at the statements coming out from the armed forces earlier this week when this happened, they've made it clear that the real test of power is not capacity to leave a union, but capacity to stay in one. And clearly that seems to be what Nigeria is going to do going forward, which is bring together the remaining 12 countries that are officially still in the ECOWAS bloc and show their economic superiority over these countries that have chosen to be out of the bloc.
Okay, Babajide, I mean, this year ECOWAS turns 50 and Nigeria remains the rallying point for ECOWAS. When you look at the future, what is it looking like for the bloc?
So this year, half a century in ECOWAS, we've seen 3 countries, Mauritania, we've seen 4 countries, Mauritania and these 3 countries leave the bloc. So there has to be a new way of thinking for ECOWAS for the next half a century. What is the new vision and mission for ECOWAS? If we take a look at how ECOWAS, the economy of ECOWAS today is, looking at our standard format of looking at how prosperous and the opportunities in these countries are, looking at their GDP per person, what you clearly see is Nigeria is in the top 5 rank of GDP per capita. These 3 countries that are leaving are in the bottom 5, Burkina Faso, Mali, Republic of Niger. So chances are that we'll still see a lot of migration going from these countries that are in the bottom half of the table to countries that are in the upper half of the table. And beyond this, here's where we finally want to land, and that is, even Nigeria, we need to ask ourselves, how African is Nigeria? And if we take a look at the chart of the week, it will give us an understanding of why, as Nigeria, we need to ask ourselves, how African is Nigeria? I've been studying our trade relationship for the last 6 decades. But tonight I'd like to focus on what has happened in terms of how much Nigeria trades in the last 5 years. And if we take a look at that, in the last 5 years, Nigeria's total crude oil trade, 89.1 trillion naira. However, only 12% of this was with Africa. Nigeria's raw materials trade in the last half a decade, 14.7 trillion naira. Only 9% of this with African countries. Nigeria's agricultural trade in the last 5 years, 12.5 trillion naira. Only 4% of this was with African countries. Solid minerals trade, 14.7 trillion naira. Only 2% of this with African countries. So the question is, how African is Nigeria? Because clearly the numbers don't lie, and from the facts, Nigeria's trade and Nigeria's prosperity really has been out of Africa. Anne.
All right. Thank you very much. That's a good place to end tonight's discussion. Babajide Ogunsanwo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst. Thanks always for your exciting
The pleasure is all mine.
On the news at 10.
I was going to ask you, how African are you?
Very African.